Hello friends and welcome to the Great Detective channel. Today I'm standing at the All Saints churchyard in Dovercourt, near Harwich, in the east of England. The grave we are visiting today is the grave of Charles Fryatt. Charles Algernon Fryatt was born on the 2nd of December 1872 in Southampton, in the south of England. He was the son of Mary and Charles Fryatt Sr., a merchant navy officer. The family lived for a few years in Southampton before moving to Harwich in Essex. After finishing school, Charles Fryatt joined the merchant navy. On the 23rd of August 1882, at the age of 14, he joined the ships of the Great Eastern Railway as a deck boy. In the 19th century, many European railway companies operated maritime services as part of their networks in order to provide continental connections, passengers, mail, livestock. The Great Eastern Railway thus operated, from the late 19th century onward, a fleet of ships linking Harwich with Antwerp, Rotterdam and Hoek van Holland. Fryatt's career therefore continued on the ships of this railway company, climbing steadily through the ranks. On the 2nd of November 1896, he married in Kingston-upon-Hull in northern England. His wife Ethel would give him 7 children, 6 daughters and 1 son, also named Charles. In 1913, Charles Fryatt received his first command as captain of the SS Colchester, a ship on which his own father had previously served as an officer. On the 4th of August 1914, Germany invaded Belgium. The Netherlands remained and would remain neutral throughout the war. Charles Fryatt was 41, and his employer decided to continue operating commercial routes to the Dutch ports of Rotterdam and Hoek van Holland. Sailing in the North Sea was no longer safe, navigation channels were no longer marked, the sea was filled with mines, and a new weapon prowled the waters: submarines. Early military submarines dated back to the American Civil War some 50 years earlier, but the First World War saw their regular and systematic use, mainly by the Germans. And like many other new weapons in the conflict, submarines introduce uncertainty and legal grey areas concerning the laws of war. At the beginning of the conflict, German submarine commanders generally surfaced, demanded the surrender of a merchant vessel, and allowed its crew to take to the lifeboats before sinking the ship. As the war progressed, however, submarine warfare escalated dramatically, even though some German commanders distinguished themselves, for better or worse, by their personal conduct. A first major step in this escalation came on the 10th of February 1915. On that day, the British Admiralty, led by Winston Churchill, issued secret orders to all British merchant vessels. These orders stated, "No British merchant ship should ever tamely surrender to a submarine, but should do its utmost to escape. If a submarine comes up suddenly close ahead with obvious hostile intentions, steer straight for it at utmost speed, altering course as necessary to keep it ahead. The submarine will probably dive, in which case your ship will have ensured its safety, as she will be compelled to come up astern of your ship." Less than a month later, on the 2nd of March 1915, Captain Fryatt encountered his third German submarine. That day, he was commanding the Wrexham, about 40 miles off the Dutch coast. Following the Admiralty's instruction, the captain ordered full speed ahead, pushing the ship to a record of 16 knots. The Wrexham reached Rotterdam safe and nearly sound. The captain's bold maneuver had, however, burned out the ship's funnels. For this act of bravery, Captain Fryatt received a gold watch from the Great Eastern Railway. The Wrexham was subsequently withdrawn from service, and Captain Fryatt was transferred to another ship, the SS Brussels. During his third voyage as captain of the Brussels, Fryatt encountered a German submarine for the second time. On the 28th of March 1915, while sailing from Harwich to Hoek van Holland, a German submarine was spotted near the Moose Buoy. It was U-33, U-33, commanded by Captain Konrad Ganser, who would later reveal his true nature when, on the 30th of March 1916, he torpedoed the SS Portugal, a Russian hospital ship. But let's get back to the 28th of March 1915. U-33 signaled to the Brussels and ordered her to stop. Choosing to follow the Admiralty's orders, Captain Fryatt altered course and charged at the submarine to force it to dive. 1 month earlier, on the 28th of February 1915, another ship, the SS Tordis, commanded by Captain John Bell, had rammed and sunk a German submarine, becoming the first civilian vessel ever to do so. Did this event influence Fryatt's decision to charge submarine U-33? Impossible to say. Was he influenced by Lord Claude Hamilton, chairman of the Great Eastern Railway, who would later claim in 1923 to have instructed his captains to make every effort to ram and sink German submarines? Again, impossible to know. In any case, in his logbook, Fryatt recorded that at 1:30 p.m. the submarine was forced to dive and its periscope passed beneath the bow of the Brussels. Back in Harwich, Fryatt was once more praised for his bravery and received another gold watch, this time from the Admiralty, engraved, presented by the Lords Commissioners of the Admiralty to Charles Algernon Fryatt, master of the SS Brussels, in recognition of the example set by that vessel when attacked by a German submarine on the 28th of March 1915. Months passed, with other encounters between British ships and German submarines, sometimes favoring the German side, sometimes favoring the British side, to the indignation of the Germans, who considered such attempts at ramming not as legitimate self-defense by a civilian vessel, but as illegal acts by a franc-tireur. On the nights of the 22nd to the 23rd of June 1916, the Brussels left the port of Hoek van Holland for England. Once at sea, a flare was fired from the shore, probably signaling the presence of enemy forces. 12 miles west of the Meusboy, a small vessel was detected, signaling the letter S in Morse code. Captain Fryatt was worried, while his first officer William Hartnell scanned the night horizon with binoculars. The Brussels was steaming at full speed with all lights out, and when the small vessel was detected, the navigation lights were briefly switched on for a single minute. 15 minutes later, 5 German torpedo boats, including G101 and G102, G101 and G102, surrounded the Brussels. Captain Fryatt had no choice but to surrender. He destroyed secret documents and diplomatic mail, then received the German boarding party. The Germans ordered the passengers into lifeboats, and the Brussels was taken to Zeebrugge and then to Bruges, where the crew was imprisoned in the town hall. Charles Fryatt and William Hartnell were interrogated for 2 days. On the 3rd day, the entire crew, with the exception of the stewardess, was sent to the civilian internment camp at Ruhleben near Berlin. The stewardesses were repatriated to England. Less than a month later, Captain Fryatt and William Hartnell were brought back to Bruges. The Germans had decided to prosecute Captain Fryatt before a court-martial based on the inscription found on the gold watch given to him by the Admiralty. The trial took place on the 27th of July 1916 at the Bruges Town Hall. Fryatt was accused of having attempted, despite being a civilian, to sink U-33 on the 20th of March 1915. He defended himself by stating that he had done nothing wrong. Unfortunately, he did not mention that he had merely followed Admiralty orders, which would have strongly supported his case under German law. At 4 p.m., the court delivered its verdict: guilty. Captain Fryatt was sentenced to death, and the sentence was confirmed by the German Emperor. That same day, at 6 p.m., Fryatt was led into a courtyard, today known as the Beleg der Gefusilleerd, the courtyard of the executed, where he briefly exchanged final words with the German pastor before being shot at 7 p.m. 30 minutes after the execution, a telegram arrived from Berlin requesting that the sentence be postponed. Too late. Charles Fryatt was buried in Bruges. William Hartnell was sentenced to 4 years imprisonment. A neutral country during the First World War, the Netherlands was a hub of espionage networks. Recall, for instance, that Mata Hari was Dutch. The capture of the Brussels allowed the Germans to dismantle several spy rings. Renamed Brugge by its captors, the ship was scuttled at the entrance to the port of Zeebrugge on the 5th of October 1918 to block a potential British attack. The port had previously been attacked on the 23rd of April 1918. In August 1919, the wreck was salvaged, returned to the British authorities in April 1920, and sold to an Irish company that same August. The vessel was finally scrapped in Glasgow in May 1929. For their part, two of the German torpedo boats that participated in the capture of Captain Fryatt, G-101 and G-102, were interned after the war with the rest of the German fleet at Scapa Flow. On the 21st of June 1919, following the orders of Admiral Ludwig von Reuter, these boats were scuttled. G-101 was successful, G-102 less so, the British managing to prevent its sinking by beaching it on the shore of the Orkney Islands. The photograph of a British sailor attempting to remove the German imperial flag from G-102 is one of the most famous images of a scuttling of the German fleet at Scapa Flow. The execution of Captain Fryatt shocked the entire world. He had merely defended his ship while following Admiralty orders, and the submarine U-33 had not been sunk. It emerged unharmed from the encounter. Its commander, Konrad Ganser, survived the war and died on the 6th of April 1937. Accused of murder by the international community, the Germans examined the Fryatt case, among other cases, within a large legal inquiry. The Kommission zur Untersuchung der Anklagen wegen völkerrechtswidriger Behandlung der Kriegsgefangene in Deutschland. Commission for the investigation of allegations of violations of international law in the treatment of prisoners of war in Germany. Also known as the Schücking Commission, after its chairman, Walter Schücking, a German law professor and pacifist. On the 2nd of April 1919, the Commission upheld the sentence in the Fryatt case. It found no violation of international law, though it regretted the speed with which the sentence had been carried out. Two members of the Commission, Edward Bernstein and Oskar Kohn, dissented, stating that the execution of Captain Fryatt had been a grave breach of international law and an inexcusable judicial murder. On the 4th of July 1919, 2 months after the Commission's verdict, Fryatt's body was exhumed and repatriated to England. Upon its arrival in Dover on the 7th of July, the coffin was placed in wagon number 132 of the South Eastern and Chatham Railway, the same wagon that had carried the remains of Edith Cavell on the 15th of May 1919, and that would carry the remains of the British unknown warrior on the 10th of November 1920. On the morning of the 8th of July, the train left Dover and arrived in London around 11 a.m. After a national funeral service in St. Paul's Cathedral, Captain Fryatt was buried in Dovercourt, near Harwich. Among all the victims of the First World War, only 3 people received a state funeral in the United Kingdom: the unknown warrior, Edith Cavell, and Captain Fryatt. All 3 were transported in wagon number 132, today preserved as the Cavell van at the small station of Bodiham on the Kent and East Sussex Railway. So the remains of 3 persons transited via the Cavell van. Out of these 3 persons, only the memory of Captain Fryatt faded away in time. However, a street in Bruges bears his name, as does a mountain in Canada, and as does the hospital of Harwich. Charles, the only son of Captain Fryatt, followed in the footsteps of his father and grandfather, and also became a sailor in the Merchant Navy. Friends, thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope to see you soon for another video. Bye!